Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy McIlrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. This is Tracy McIlrath, the founder of the Eating at a Meeting podcast, which you're listening to now, and also Thrive Meetings and Events. And on this show, I talk to experts in all facets of food and beverage about how to create safe, inclusive, and sustainable food and beverage experiences. This is my third episode live from IMEX America. And on this episode, I have two leaders in sustainability, which I'm excited to have here to talk to us. So it's Yalmaz Siddiqui, Vice President of Corporate Sustainability at MGM, and also the chair of the Events Industry Council's
Sustainability and Social Impact Committee.
Okay, fantastic. And then the other one is my friend Mariela McIlrath. I always mutilate your last name, so I'm so sorry. People mutilate Stuckrath all the time. You are the Vice President of Sustainability and Industry Advancement for the Events Industry Council. You both have really big jobs. How do you manage that?
The more you do, the more you get done.
Yeah. That's a good philosophy. It's like the more birthdays you have, the longer you live.
I like it.
Yeah. So we're at IMEX America, the 10th rendition of this, and we're in your property, MGM, and it's really focused on sustainability. And I interviewed Dale and Eric Wallinger yesterday about what the efforts are here, but I want to, from the Events Industry Council perspective, there are events industry sustainability standards that I've worked on in the past, and I know that they've been reworked on and reworked again. So can you tell me where they currently stand and what we can expect?
One thing that we know is that sustainability will always continue to evolve. We'll always have new information. We'll always have new best practices. And we're on a learning journey. So the more we learn, the more we can adapt and keep those standards current. So we are going to be re-releasing them. We're going to have some consultation with our member organizations just to make sure that the new standards are really reflective of the needs of our audience. And I'm really excited about the changes that we're making. Some of those include just adding a lot more guidance, really making it very clear to people how they go about it. We've tried to really focus in on materiality. So what is the stuff that really matters? And try to balance the administrative burden as it relates to the rigor of the standards. So we don't want to dilute the rigor, but we also want to make sure that we're not overcomplicating the documentation and the evidence requirements. So how can we provide the right amount of evidence in order to demonstrate that those items have been achieved? So we've had lots of really great conversations to try to narrow that down, to really focus in on the actions and the behaviors that we really need in order to affect change.
Can I add one really big layer to the standards?
Yeah, please do.
And share it. A new basic level. So if you're just starting your journey on sustainability, and many are, in our industry, there's some companies, some organizations that really have taken this on and it's part of their being, part of the way they think, and others are starting. So one of the things we added that's going to be coming out in the future of the standards is a foundations level. So if you just want to start, just do the basics, get on the journey. You could just focus there first. Right. And it might be a year. You've got the foundations for a year, not actually applying for the full standard because it's very comprehensive. And that's one thing we felt would be helpful to bring others along on the journey. Because standards are complex. They can be very complex. They're extensive. And in order to meet a high level of sustainability, you need to do a lot. And that's what the standard represents, a lot. The clear criteria that define sustainability during the event, because that ultimately a standard is a definition.
Yeah, and just having interviewed Mark and Sean from IAC in their session on Monday, which was 2 days ago, one person in the audience is just, where do I start? Because you look at all these standards and there's all these things to accomplish. It's like, just take one step. And even Dale said it. Just take one step, try one thing and see if it works, and then add on more.
And I agree with that. I also think that one of those first steps should be creating a sense of urgency within your organization, that making sure that one of the first steps is really transforming that organizational culture to embed sustainability and social impact in all decision-making processes.
And that's hard because you got to get that CEO to buy in.
You have to get everybody to buy in. It really is, everyone needs to do the part that is relevant to the work that they do. And every facet of our industry has a sustainability and social impact consideration.
I agree with Mariela, and I agree with you. The journey is very hard for functions. And certain people in whatever, purchasing, supply chain, HR, finance, they don't necessarily understand the basics around sustainability and how it relates to their functional area. Same in every function in the events journey. Don't necessarily understand how this relates. But I think the job of the sustainability champion, often self-declared. We've all chosen, self-declared, we are sustainability champions. And our job is actually to enroll people on the journey. Maybe not the CEO right away. It might take many voices to engage the CEO. But maybe we're lucky. Our CEOs might be engaged. But again, if you think that you have to wait for leadership to allow you to do sustainability in your event or in your division or in your company, you might be waiting a long time. If you flip it and say, my job is to find people to join me in this journey, and then over time we might get the head of HR, the head of finance, the head of purchasing, ultimately our C-suite to be engaged. If you've taken it on, that's you're taking advantage of your own power.
And understand what motivates them. What are the things that they're going to be looking for as the key drivers? Maybe they're looking for specific types of metrics. So make sure that you're documenting that so that when you have that opportunity, you can convey the message in the best possible way. And the other thing that I would add is that we are all on this journey, and it is so important that we walk this path with kindness. And we all have opportunities to learn. And I think that we should make sure that we treat that opportunity as an opportunity to share our knowledge and share, and listen to what other people are doing, because there's such great innovations happening everywhere.
There are. And it reminds me when I first started speaking about food allergies and stuff way back when, and my first speaking gig doing that was actually in this hotel at Exhibitor Show.
Is that right?
Yeah. And so back in 2011 or 12, but when I first presented it, they're like, you're so passionate, you come off as defensive. And in the last 11 years, it's like, so you are the sustainability champion. And I like the fact that you say you've got to get people on board. And that's more of an education, not of a pointing your finger at them and saying, you've got to do this. And it's just, okay, let's have fun with this. Let's learn something and do it and get everybody on there, whether it's in procurement or the chef or whatever, to figure out how to do it. And the people who manage your waste here, they've got a huge part of this. And what are their steps? But showing them, I think, is fun.
Yeah, enrolling people in different ways, to Mariela's point, depending on where they are functionally, where they are in hierarchy, what role they play.
Right.
And it's really important to empathize, put yourself in their shoes, and realize that they don't have the knowledge that you might have. You've got deep knowledge in allergies and food safety. You've got deep knowledge in sustainability. So I can't necessarily persuade them with technical complexity
and acronyms and all of these different terminologies. And you gotta, I even had a conversation with my niece about they and them and understanding it. And she's 20. And I'm like, okay, it just doesn't compute. And then I call my friend Jessica Pettit and I'm like, please compute this for me. And that comes under the sustainability aspects as well, understanding where everybody's coming from, because that's inclusion. And that you don't think about, and most people probably don't even think that comes under sustainability.
That's a good point, isn't it? I mean, can we spend time defining? I mean, I know this podcast is about food, but you're eating at a meeting. You're happy for us to be really broad and go into the history of sustainability.
Please do. Yeah.
So the term began in 1987.
Okay.
In a book called Our Common Future, authored by the UN Commission on Environment and Development.
Okay.
The leader of that commission was Gro Harlem Brundtland. She was the Prime Minister of Norway at that time. And the definition of sustainability that came out of that effort was sustainability or sustainable development, the longer form, is development that meets the needs of the present generations without compromising the ability for future generations to meet their own needs. And needs, in a further iteration, got defined maybe a little bit more clearly as environmental needs, social needs, and economic needs. That was like 87 to early 90s. That's the founding definition, founding time frame for sustainability. Fast forward to today, now the Sustainable Development Goals, which have 17 ideas that actually also divide into economic, environmental, and social, if you look at them and pass them out. That's what we mean. When we say sustainability, it includes gender equality. It includes work and economic growth. It includes sustainable cities. It includes partnerships. And I think the events industry is a perfect illustration of that notion of partnerships in order to advance sustainability. We need many players in the value chain partnering to advance.
I love that. Thank you very much.
A little history lesson?
Yes, a little bit, definitely. And I think we've been talking about Mariela, you and I have been talking about sustainability for a while, especially when talking about food and beverage, but I went to Slow Food Terra Madre Salon de Gusto, and I think it was in 2016, and they had a big wall with all the UN standards. And I probably am the only person that stopped and looked at all the whole wall walking down. Everybody, it was just a walkway. And I came back from that going, okay, how do I incorporate these things? But I know with the standards for EIC, we're learning to do those, but it's like end hunger and land below sea and land above the ground and climate action and all of those things. So the standards that you're doing, that's incorporating all of that, right?
Absolutely. We definitely want to align with the Sustainable Development Goals. And actually one of the first steps to the standards is endorsing the principles for sustainable events.
I've done that.
Yeah, and those drill down into 4 areas. Recognizing that we all have to work together and that we have environmental, social, and economic responsibilities, that people, planet, and prosperity approach. So we have definitely integrated that. And it's also a lens by which we design a lot of the education for EIC. It's such an important, comprehensive framework that provides a pathway forward.
And if you go on their website, the UN's website, and look at those, there's such great information and in-depth going into even the definition of what you provided, the history, like even further, because people don't really realize that it is all encompassing.
It's about improving the world, all people ultimately, but helping the planet and people thrive. That's what we're trying to do. That's a pretty positive thing. We all want to get behind that, I hope and think.
I would hope so, yeah.
And in addition to being all-encompassing, as you mentioned, it's all interconnected. Individual sustainable development goals relate to each other. And that's, one of the things that we have to always be mindful of is making sure that we're looking at the decisions that we're making and how do they support all of those sustainable development goals.
That's awesome. So can we jump into food a little bit on that aspect? So I told you last night at dinner that I used the vertical farm picture that I took at WEC from a long time ago, but and I also have a picture, I think that you shared with me, of the chefs with the donation to the food bank. And interviewing Dale the other day, I was like, she's like, her first step is look at the waste. What kind of waste do you have from your conventions and stuff? But your Yalmaz, MGM's partnership, can you talk a little bit about that and reducing that food waste as well? And what that steps in, Mariela, how can we work to reduce that food waste? Not that we don't want to give it to the food bank, but what's that circular conversation? So start with you, Yalmaz.
Yeah, this could be a long answer if that's okay.
That's fine, yeah.
I want to go back to 2016. I joined MGM in 2016, and my first project was understand the event space and understand food.
Because you came from
I came from Office Depot. I headed sustainability for 10 years at Office Depot. So if you buy recycled paper in an Office Depot, my words are on the back of that ream of recycled paper.
That's kind of cool. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So my first job was to understand what convention clients want from a sustainability standpoint. And naturally, quickly, the research revealed they want to understand what happens to the food that's left behind after a banquet. And really, they like that it might not be going to landfill or going to feed animals or compost or whatever, but they really want any food that's safe, that can be safely donated, to be donated. And what I understood back then, 2016, Las Vegas had not been doing that for decades. And Las Vegas is a global hub of the convention industry, right? Banquets every day, and there have been for
hundreds of them a day, thousands of them,
for decades, right? But there was always the legal barrier to donate. And I'll come back to, I don't want to take too long, but I'll come back to food waste of other types and source reduction, etc. But specifically on food donations, we had to solve a lot of problems in order to donate food safely. We needed to first get legal on board. So we had to do a lot of research. What are the laws? We had to get the Southern Nevada Health District on board. We need to understand what are their protocols and how do they conceive of food safety and donations? What's their role? Should they advise us? What authority can they give to an entity like ours to donate food? We had to get our food safety teams involved. We had to get our chefs involved, our stewards involved. We had to find a partner willing to take, and we had to get philanthropy involved to fund. So it ended up being a $750,000 budget to put all the pieces together, buy new equipment. And then we started donating. I remember it was an event with Cisco. We donated about 900 pounds of potatoes and an egg, I think. And
one egg?
No, not one egg. Scrambled egg and potatoes. But the Catholic charities. I took it myself, actually. There was a lot of potatoes. And now we're including banquet food and minibar food and warehouse food. We're now at 2.6 million meals donated since 2016.
That's amazing.
Really great. And now it's a norm. Like at IMEX, unserved food is being donated as long as we can.
Time and temperature controlled.
Time and temperature controls.
Yep.
I can get into a lot of source reduction and feed to animals, but I think the most important thing for event planners is actually donation. And the lesson I'd give is ask your venue repeatedly. Tell them there's a good Samaritan that can alleviate the liability. And they've just got to acknowledge that it's hard. It's much easier to take food and put it in the trash.
Yep.
One step. Dump it. Think about the complexity of keeping it safe. Getting logging the temperatures, getting the chefs to do another whole task, and the stewarding team to time it with the equipment, hot boxes.
Right.
It's really complex, but it's so worth it when you see this high quality food actually being used and enjoyed by people in need.
And it's different quality of food that the food banks don't, or the charities don't often receive. So it really does make a difference in terms of being able to provide high quality proteins and lots of great fruits and vegetables and things that are so important for human health.
Very true.
It reminds me of a story from a woman from Sight, and I don't remember her name, but it was an event in Spain, and she was back at the house and she saw a server crying as she was dumping filet mignon into the trash can. And she said, "What is wrong?" She said, "I can't afford to buy this for my family, and my job is telling me to throw it away." Because I don't even remember if it was cooked or or uncooked or whatever, but that just goes to show we don't need to throw that away. Let her take it home for her family. And
as long as it's safe.
As long as it's safe, exactly. And so that one picture is the chefs, and it's the flash freezers. Is that right? So can you tell a little bit about what that process is and how that's helped the food bank as well? Because it allows them to store more food later, because they now have freezers too, right?
That's right. Okay. We're lucky in that our food bank in Las Vegas, 3 Square, has a blast chiller.
Okay.
A freezer that basically gets the food down to safe temperature within a short amount of time. You basically got, I think I remember the numbers exactly, but you shouldn't donate food if it's below 135 degrees.
Right.
So first it's going to be kept hot, above 135. Then you've got 4 hours to get, I'm not going to say the numbers because I don't fully remember them. My team watches this all the time. You've got 4 hours to get down to a specific temperature, then you've got another 2 hours to get to the safe temperature.
Okay.
And blast chillers in a large format venue like ours, you need a lot of cold air to get that hot food down to the correct temperature in time. Otherwise, it's not safe. So part of our legal discussion was, what are the parameters under which we donate? And then if we're in doubt, we throw it out. It goes to our animals, feeds animals at least, but we want to keep people safe as the first priority.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So blast chiller at 3 Square. Now we've also got blast chillers in our kitchens.
Wow.
But those are used for production. Okay. So it's hard sometimes when they're producing for the next meal to use the same blast chiller for cooling down.
Mm-hmm.
What we ended up doing was with 3 Square, the local food bank, inventing a mobile blast chiller. It's being used today at IMEX.
Oh, wow.
No one had a refrigerated van with very high volume fans,
mm-hmm.
so that the airflow is like significantly higher than typical refrigerator or freezer vans.
Mm-hmm.
So we invented it. It was a very complicated thing to invent.
Wow.
But we're using it today. It's plugged in
mm-hmm.
behind Mandalay Bay,
mm-hmm.
and the food from IMEX is being stored in that mobile blast chiller, and then will be driven to 3 Square.
Wow.
And the reason we need something like that is, for an event like IMEX, there's so much use of the blast chiller in the cooking for
mm-hmm.
IMEX that adding a donation layer coming
right.
in is really too much for the chefs to manage. It's really complex.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of a blast chiller powered by the sun.
That's
just add on to your invention.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's true. Because 90%
yeah.
of the power at Mandalay Bay today, right mm-hmm. now, is powered by the sun. So that blast chiller is actually I never thought about that. It is.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Making connections. That's what it's all about.
All right, Mariela. So talk about, before we donate, are there and I talk about this all the time, but I want it from someone else's voice, ways that we can actually reduce that consumption or overconsumption or production.
Lots of practical ways that we can do that. One is making sure your numbers, checking your history, asking for your history from one event so that you can make better decisions for the next.
Mm-hmm.
Have a food donation program, but use it to understand what your group's preferences are. So go and look and see, this group really likes this and doesn't like that. So next time, order more of this and less of that. Again, the numbers is important. Think about the serving sizes as well, the portion sizes, and think about all of those aspects of, and to your point, of course, making sure that the food allergens are looked after, because if people don't have the food that they can eat, they're not going to eat it. So you need to make sure that's done properly, that people know where to go and get it, and just lots of communication. I also think that it's very important that the planners, the organizers, be the ones to share with the attendees the story. Because a change in service style means that you're not going to see the buffet be as plentiful as it might have been without a food waste strategy. And that might reflect on the food service provider. We have to change that perception. We have to change that sense that overabundance versus sufficiency, and focus in on that so that we can reduce that waste before it happens.
Can I pick up 2 points, Mariela?
Yeah, please.
So firstly, I totally agree with the tracking, what people like. We had a chef who loved the particular dish and would prepare it all the time. And when we did this very detailed waste analysis of what food is getting left behind, his favorite dish had to be taken off the banquet menu.
Wow.
No one ate a favorite dish.
Wow.
The other thing I'd add is, in the same analysis, we looked at what's causing food waste, especially unserved at banquets. Yeah. And the number one reason was no-shows, particularly as the event progresses. Mm-hmm. So you might be planning the same volume day 1, day 2, day 3.
Absolutely.
Day 2, day 3, you probably got 10%, 15% no-show because they now go into the restaurants or whatever. So communication to say, we plan the food based on you coming to eat the food in the central banquet hall. If you go to restaurants and don't eat the food in the banquet hall, then that's wasted.
And I had one client who they were here for 7 years, and then we went to Rose and Shingle Creek in Orlando, and this is not a bad thing about them, but their numbers were probably like 25-30% of everybody came through the exhibit hall for their meal functions. And when we got there, the hotel's like, Tracy, your numbers are jumping. We based it on history. The difference between that is here in Vegas, all those exhibitors and those attendees had other places to go eat, walk to finding food. And Rose and Shingle Creek had 4 restaurants on property that could not fit 2,000 people in it all that time. So they didn't have anywhere to go. And my clients, they're cheating us. They're trying to make more food and make more money off of us. I'm like, they're not. But if you flip that onto the other side, you actually really have to look about what's your venue, where you are, and what options are there so that you are planning accordingly, because you will, yesterday at lunch, I saw a mass exodus of people off the show floor going to get lunch, have business meetings elsewhere. But you have to think about those aspects of your event.
It's complicated. It really is. And you have to accept and talk about empathy. Put yourself in the chef's shoes.
Right.
He or she does not want to
be making food at the last minute.
Right. So unless the planet accepts that food's going to run out, that's unlikely as well, isn't it? So it is a balance, and there will probably always be some food left behind if you're trying to find that fine line. Partly we should accept that.
And Jim Spellows, do you know Jim? I know Jim. Do you know Jim?
Oh, yeah.
So he's one of the industry's tech people, tech gurus, but he also works with Rock and Wrap It Up, which is a food donation company that helps planners. But he had one client, and they had it in the contract that they were going to donate the food, and they were getting closer and closer. And 2-3 weeks out, the hotels called them and said, "Please don't make us do this." And the planner was just distraught, because he's in the back of the house and he sees all these potatoes or whatever it is just being dumped into the garbage because that property just did not want to do it.
Because of legal issues?
Whatever they never decided or never said. And that's just, and I think you said it earlier, it's like you have to continue to have those conversations throughout that entire planning process and think about it and get that donation lined up.
That hotel was not ready because they hadn't followed the protocols, made the case, got the budget, assigned the people. There's really multiple roles involved in donating.
And very practical things like, where are the containers going to come from? How are the containers going to be labeled? What's going to happen with the food? Who's going to handle it?
Where are those containers going to be stored before we use them? Yeah. Lots of different things to think about. And Mark and Sean and I were talking about yesterday or Monday on my session. I said, how many of you plan your food and beverage more than 2 weeks out or more than a month out? And it was a room full of 100 meeting planners, and one person raised their hand. And they're not thinking about it until the last minute. And I'm like, and I don't know if I said it this way, but I'm like, I'm flabbergasted because it's your number one expenditure. And you spend the least amount of time focused on it because we're focused on all these other different aspects of the meeting. And let's change that for sustainability practices and budget reasons. Because you said it, I'm like, or one of you said it, is if we don't plan for it, it's wasted, or the dietary needs. If you don't plan for those, the meal's going to go eaten. So you just wasted your money and you wasted food.
Yeah.
So suggestions on how we can start thinking about or get planners to think about it earlier.
One of the things is to have set day of the week menus.
Okay.
With allergen considerations done, one of the things that helps reduce waste is reducing variability. So if the chef is only preparing one type of meal for all the events, there's going to be less waste rather than customizing the menus for each one of the events in-house. So the more we can try to work and be flexible to work with what is planned in the venue, that's a good way to think about it. And then you don't have to really think about it too far in advance because it's already planned for you.
Okay, and then from a hotel perspective, do your sales managers talk about the sustainability with their planners when they come, or do they wait for the planners to address it?
It's both. Okay. So sometimes it depends on the person. We have trained, with the sustainability team, we've trained all of our sales, catering, convention team members on our sustainable events program, but this is a new language for many people. So they're not always comfortable. Some will be. And once they get uncomfortable talking about all the possibilities, they often reach out to our team, the sustainability team. And then we work for 2 years with Dale and Eric to plan a whole range of aspects around sustainability and social impact. That really they relied on us as the sustainability experts in the company.
Well, and it was interesting in the interview with them is she's like, this is the first time she's been in the property since that site visit, but without the standards and the guidelines or SOPs that they have, they couldn't have executed it as well, not having been here in 2 years because of COVID. But they also, and Eric was like, it was really great saying, okay, MGM procurement team, let's talk about this, and allowing them their input on how to do this better because they are the boots on the ground.
And lots of them, you mentioned procurement. In fact, that's a good segue to the buy side. We've talked a lot about the the management of the waste side. I'm sure you've got lots of questions or lots of thoughts on food to buy.
Right. Yeah. And especially with COVID right now coming back and food supply orders, or where are we getting our food from? And chefs, what I've heard from a lot of people is they're ordering it a month out. They can't order it 2 weeks out when a planner is deciding it. So how has COVID impacted it, and or how does procurement get into that conversation on food purchases?
Philosophically, we've been in this just-in-time mentality over the last few decades, where you're getting things just in time, you're consolidating more and more buy to single vendors to enable economies of scale. But COVID's really taught us that resilience and diversity is much more important than we might have planned for in the past. So multiple sources of supply for the same items, really elevating the supply diversity. We already had a commitment to 10% of our spend across all categories from diverse suppliers, certified diverse suppliers, but that we're taking a really serious look at that and expanding to have more diverse suppliers in our mix, including food and beverage, because that builds resilience.
It's like not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
And when COVID hits, and see you later, bye.
Yeah, and the diverse suppliers actually were most flexible during COVID for masks, for PPE. The small diverse suppliers had knowledge of alternative sources of things that we needed as a company that the large players weren't ready for. And the same goes for food.
Yeah. And you and I've talked about you buying locally and sourcing that. And I do remember talking to a chef who reached out to a farmer for his eggs. And he's like, I can't give you my eggs because then I can't sell them to Mariela at the farmer's market. So it is, and your property itself, you can't go to that small scale farmer to get your eggs for IMEX, right? That's not going to happen. But it is like looking at those farmers who can do some of those things regionally for the size hotel you have, but even for small ones. Yeah.
And we also need to think about the amount of produce that we need. So one of the things about events is that the demand goes up and down. So one day you might have 4,000 people, the next day you might have 300 people. So that's harder for some of the smaller suppliers to sometimes support with. So that's why that network is having that large pool is really helpful. If you think about local organic spinach, that's a lot of farmland in order to produce, local organic spinach for 4,000 people. So you have to think through some of that part too.
Yeah. Okay. So I always ask everybody what their favorite food and beverage is. And then, so I'm going to go ahead and ask you that, and then we'll throw one extra question at you. Okay, I'll let you ponder that. But one tip for people to start this process, and how to get the standards. Where do they get those?
The standards you can get from our website, eventscouncil.org. Okay. And then one thing to get started. I would say talk to someone who's doing something and get inspired. Yeah, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay.
They choose, in my opinion, they choose to do one thing, and then wherever they are in the value chain, if you're a general contractor, or if you're a planner, or if you're a venue, start with what you're interested in. If you're interested in food, do one thing around food. If you're interested in waste, do one thing around waste. If you're worried about the plastic crisis, do one thing about plastics, and just encourage who you can encourage and influence to partner with you.
Okay. I like that. And what you just said just reminded me of all the different aspects of even food, like the air and all of that. But we'll go into that in another episode because it takes too long. But okay, so food and beverage, or what is your favorite food and beverage? What would be your ideal meal?
For me, I think it's food shared with friends and family. It doesn't really matter to me what the meal is. It's more the experience that you have of connecting with people. And I think that shared food experiences really bring.
That's awesome.
Like fish. So a good sustainably sourced halibut with tomatoes and capers. And
very specific.
And a very good mashed potato. Like we had the other day. With a lot of good butter. So that would be my...
maybe it's out of the chickpea fries too.
And the chickpea fries. Oh, yeah.
Okay, where did you get the mashed potatoes and where'd you get the chickpea fries?
Oh my gosh, you have to try these chickpea fries.
Where?
They're just... I'm going to have to go back there before I leave. Yeah. These things are amazing. It's at Revea.
Revea is on the top floor of Delano, Mandalay Bay. And it's Alain Ducasse, who's a very celebrated chef. And one of his most celebrated dishes actually is called panisse. And it's chickpea, very round, almost into a liquid, and then flash fried, like a shape of a fry. And then you have this thing, and it's crunchy on the outside, and it just melts.
It's just amazing.
Really?
Softly in your mouth.
Okay.
And then you get a little smell of chickpea in the back, but you can't quite process. It's fried, but it's chickpea, and it's got crunch and soft.
It's just amazing.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here till Thursday night, so I will go eat there.
All right, and then the mashed potato is just very rich.
From the same place?
Same place.
Okay.
You're going to be ready for rich mashed potato, but it's another specialty dish.
Okay. And is he using the aquafaba from the chickpeas, or is he just using, do you know what aquafaba is?
It's the liquid that's
from the can.
Left in the end.
Or is it just the chickpeas?
I don't know if he's using aquafaba.
But maybe we should find out. I think that would be a good back-of-house tour. Learn how to make them.
Because you can make mayonnaise out of aquafaba.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone, I can't remember.
And meringue. Yeah, I make it for Christmas and for desserts. You got to put the sugar in there with it, but you just turn on the mixer, and it whips up just like meringue.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, put some vanilla in there or some mint, and it's delicious. Yeah, some little tiny cookies. They're yummy. Thank you both so much for joining me and
for having us.
Taking the time out of IMEX. I know it's a busy show. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. This is the Eating at a Meeting podcast. We're here weekly, live on Wednesdays at 12 o'clock Eastern. And then on Tuesdays, the audio version of that comes out. And so this is going to be only on the audio version. So those live people are missing out. Yes, but...
Can we talk about this before?
Yeah, let's talk about the juice that we're drinking.
These delicious juices.
Yes.
These are juices made of imperfect produce.
Yeah, yummy.
It's the Misfit Station at IMEX. And it's imperfect produce, sort of the B grade or C grade fruits and vegetables that don't typically make it to supermarkets or grocery stores. So we purposefully purchased these for these smoothies. Slightly off oranges and bananas and berries and
okay, so where on the show floor am I going?
You're going next to People in Planet Village.
Okay.
Right across from our booth, conveniently.
Oh, wow. Perfect.
So, yes.
Is that where I saw Clean the World, too?
Yeah. C0730 is our booth, EIC. So come on by, and right across you can get some juice.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I read about them in Europe, and so I'm so excited that Misfit Market is here in Las Vegas at IMEX. All right. Until next time, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.